It's early morning in a small village in central Bosnia. Dutch EU4 soldiers, with a Bosnian policeman alongside, are going from house to search for hidden weapons. 10 years after the bloody war, people still have guns and grenades in their homes, nervous that the conflict may reignite. European Union peacekeepers reassure villagers if they hand in their weapons voluntarily, there'll be no prosecution. This amnesty, known as Operation Harvest, last year netted 30,000 hand grenades, 9,000 small arms, and 3 million rounds of ammunition.
What we are principally here to do is to give an absolute guarantee that hostilities will not resume here. And in order to do that, we have to demonstrate that we are a credible military force that has a robust operational capability.
Here in Pale, once the headquarters of Bosnian Serb strongman Radovan Karadzic, EU4 troops, this time Italian, are setting up roadblocks. It's part of a crackdown on smuggling and organised crime networks, which are threatening economic progress and protecting former warlords. When the EU took over peacekeeping duties from NATO at the end of last year, their aim was to build confidence among local people. EU4 soldiers are living in 50 villages throughout the country, getting to know the people and also gathering intelligence, eyes and ears on the ground, as the search continues for indicted war criminals.
I think the situation in Bosnia is now such that I would characterize our mission as more one of reassurance to the people of Bosnia, because they still fear that if the international community, particularly the military presence, left Bosnia, then they would feel exposed and fearful of people with maybe unfinished business, maybe political hotheads.
The 7,000-strong mission in Bosnia is by far the most ambitious EU military deployment to date, a sign of the EU's commitment to the security of the country. The police mission already at work here is further evidence of that commitment. Its aim to help the Bosnian police force meet international standards. It's perhaps fitting that Europe is deploying its new military capabilities here. It was in the Balkans, after all, in the 1990s, that the EU learned many lessons during the breakup of the former Yugoslavia. An American-led NATO intervention finally ended the conflict, but Europe knew that in future it must be able to deal with crises on its own doorstep.
The European Union is a group of countries, 25 countries, with a population altogether of double the population of the United States, 4 times the population of Japan. We have to be an actor in the international affairs. We are not to construct an army to go to war. We want to have forces which can be together from different countries in order to maintain peace or to create peace where peace has been broken.
In 1999, a summit in Helsinki marked the birth of Europe's security and defence policy. EU leaders pledged to build up a European crisis management capacity of up to 60,000 soldiers, able to deal with 21st century dangers. A military structure was established in Brussels, including an EU military staff, with representatives from every European country.
Quand on se souvient des équilibres de la guerre froide, c'était terrifiant. C'était des affrontements qui pouvaient détruire le monde plusieurs centaines de fois. Aujourd'hui, nous ne sommes plus dans ce contexte de menace-là, mais les dangers sont plus petits, mais ils sont plus probables. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a plus d'atteintes à la sécurité, paradoxalement, hein, qui peuvent survenir dans le monde actuel que dans le monde ancien.
The crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo was the first test for the EU's peacekeeping operations without NATO involvement. In June 2003, the United Nations asked Europe to intervene. It was to be the first EU military mission outside of Europe, manned mainly by the French, but under an EU flag. The successful Congo mission showed how the EU can play its own role without duplicating the efforts of NATO. From that came an ambitious plan to create 13 rapid reaction battle groups of up to 1,500 soldiers, which can be sent to stabilize trouble spots or protect humanitarian operations. The aim is for swift deployment within just 5 days.
We simply cannot afford to sit back and say we're going to debate this for several weeks or months before we deploy force. And really underlying the European approach, battle groups, is a recognition that the kinds of modern crises have to be resolved quickly in order to prevent them getting out of hand, in order to prevent this becoming a still worse problem.
The battle group concept is part of a package of defence measures to shake up the EU's military capabilities by the end of the decade. The European Defence Agency, recently established, will play a key role. Its job to help Europe's countries rethink and coordinate their €160 billion defence spending.
We still, collectively across Europe, spend too much money on heavy metal and high explosive, and not enough on those more modern technologies which are highly relevant to deployed operations around Europe's periphery, communication technologies, observation technologies. We are in effect moving from the industrial age of warfare to the information age. There's a technological revolution going on.
But where does NATO fit in as the EU builds up its own military strategies? In reality, Europe's defence policy is being developed in partnership with the Atlantic Alliance. And a large EU operation such as in Bosnia still shares NATO facilities, for example, communications and satellite systems.
These systems exist. It would be hugely expensive for the EU to set up parallel systems. So, if you like, we sort of subcontract from NATO and use those systems. NATO has a very sophisticated intelligence architecture which we couldn't set up and replicate for an individual EU operation. So NATO releases intelligence information to the EU.
The huge advantage the EU has in developing a defence policy is that it has more than just military means to call upon. It can use diplomatic or economic measures to manage crises, as well as civilian intervention. Europe's security strategy stresses the need for a ring of well-governed countries surrounding the EU. And the former Soviet state of Georgia saw the Union apply a new approach in civilian crisis management. After Georgia's Rose Revolution in 2003, the country was ready for a fresh start, but first had to tackle a legacy of corruption and instability. With a barely functioning police and judicial system, the country's new president asked the EU for help. Within just 11 days of the request last April, it was agreed to set up the first EU rule of law mission here.
ქვეყანაში იყო დაუსჯელობის სინდრომი, შესაბამისად საპროცესო კოდექსიც იყო მოუქნელი, მთლიანად ქვეყნის დასჯის სისტემა იყო დაპატიმრებაზე მხოლოდ დაგებული.
The EU sent in a team of judges and legal experts to the Georgian capital Tbilisi, not with money, but to support the country for 1 year in drawing up a judicial reform plan. Heading the team is Sylvie Pants, a French judge and prosecutor with wide international experience.
Alors, ce qui ne va pas, les policiers n'ont pas l'habitude de faire des enquêtes cohérentes, de ramasser des preuves. Les juges sont vulnérables, instables, pas sûrs d'être juges le lendemain, pas habitués à décider, pas fiers d'être juges. Ce qui fait que c'est un système qui est extrêmement lent, qui est extrêmement vaseux, douteux, pas sérieux, je veux dire, pas sérieux.
New mobile police patrols have already been introduced by the Georgian government to replace part of its notoriously corrupt police force. It's restored some public confidence, but faith in the judiciary remains low.
სასამართლო ხელისუფლება წინანდელს ჯობია მე ასე მეჩვენება, მაგრამ ბოლომდე დამოუკიდებლები არ არიან.
ახალმა ხელისუფლებამ რა უნდა ქნას ერთ ასე დანგრეულ ქვეყანაში? მართალია ძალიან ბევრი გააკეთა, მაგრამ ბევრია გასაკეთებელი.
Every element of the penal system, including police training and prison conditions, is being scrutinized by the EU experts. Sylvie Pants and her team have regular briefings with the Georgian Prime Minister and will shortly present their final reform recommendations.
Je suis assez fière que l'Union européenne y ait pensé, parce que c'est quelque chose que les Nations unies n'ont pas fait, et c'est quelque chose qui De mon point de vue, du fait de l'expérience des experts, du fait de la diversité des expertises qu'ils peuvent apporter, tous ces éléments permettent à une mission de ce style de réussir.
Back in Bosnia, this military mission must succeed too. First and foremost for the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also to demonstrate that the EU is now successfully building up military muscle in conjunction with its civilian crisis management, and to demonstrate that the European Union has come of age as a global security player.